Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today's topic is something we thought might be right up your alley, especially given your line of work.
Oh, really? What makes you say that?
Well, we're cracking open Carl von Clausewitz's On War.
Ah, Clausewitz, a classic.
Exactly. We're zeroing in on Chapter 5, Book 3, Military Virtue of an Army. Now, I know Clausewitz can be, well, let's just say he was a military theorist, not exactly known for his breezy beach reads.
You can say that again. He's brilliant, but he definitely takes some work to unpack.
But trust us on this chapter. It's full of insights that are just as relevant in today's world as they were back in the 19th century. What about you? Have you had a chance to dig into his work much?
I have, yeah. It's one of those books you kind of keep coming back to throughout your career, Each time you pick up something new. But what always strikes me about this chapter in particular is how Clausewitz goes beyond just simple bravery when he's trying to define what makes a military unit truly effective.
Right, it's more than just being the first one over the trenches.
Exactly. He's talking about an enduring spirit, a collective mindset that really drives success over the long haul. He uses those classic examples like Alexander the Great and Caesar's legions. But what I find so fascinating is how he breaks down how those armies actually became so formidable.
And that's what we're going to unpack today, right? That secret sauce, that X factor.
Absolutely. So Clausewitz, he doesn't waste any time. He comes right out and says it's not just about being a brave soldier or even being gung-ho about war.
It's deeper than just, yeah, let's go get them.
Right. He's saying military virtue is about taking those raw qualities, that bravery, that enthusiasm, and molding them into something even stronger: discipline, order, a deep, ingrained understanding of warfare itself.
So it's almost like what? Becoming a craftsman, dedicating yourself to mastering this incredibly demanding profession.
Exactly. Like, think about the difference between, say, a casual jogger and a marathon runner.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
They're both physically capable, right? But the marathon runner, they've got that extra level of discipline, the mental toughness, that strategic understanding of pacing and endurance. And that's what Clausewitz is getting at.
So how does he connect that to, actual soldiers on the battlefield?
Well, he uses this really interesting analogy. He compares soldiers to a guild.
A guild, like medieval blacksmiths and weavers.
Yes, he's highlighting just how unique the military profession is, how it demands its own set of codes, its own customs, because what soldiers experience is just so far removed from everyday life.
It's that whole esprit de corps thing,
Yeah.
right? That shared spirit, that understanding that you only get from going through something intense together.
Yeah.
It's what allows them to function as a unit, something far greater than just a bunch of individuals.
Exactly. And he doesn't just talk about it in these abstract terms either. Clausewitz, he paints a very vivid picture of what this military virtue actually looks like in action on the battlefield.
So give us a visual here. What are we talking about?
Imagine an army holding its formation even under intense enemy fire. They're not panicking, they're fighting for every single inch of ground. They're proud of their victories, of course, but they remain disciplined, respectful, even in defeat.
So their physical endurance is obviously important, like you said, like an athlete's. But he's saying it goes way beyond that.
Way beyond. He really emphasizes the mental aspect of it.
The ability to look at hardship and not see a setback, but a stepping stone to victory.
Exactly. It's that unwavering commitment to their duty, to the reputation of their unit. Almost like this shared sense of honor that just guides everything they do. It's like he's saying you can't just, read about courage and expect to be fearless in the heat of battle.
Right. It's got to be more than just textbook knowledge.
Exactly. You have to live it, breathe it, experience those highs and lows, and come out the other side. And it's not just about individual grit either,
What do you mean?
He's also saying it's about the collective experience of the unit. Those shared hardships that really bind soldiers together. It's the crucible of real combat experience, the kind that pushes you to your limits and shows you what you're truly capable of.
But he also warns against complacency, doesn't he? I mean, even if you've gone through hell and back together, there's always that risk of becoming complacent.
That's a really crucial point. He makes this analogy to a tree needing sunlight to grow strong.
So the sunshine for an army is
Victory. But he's not just saying you need to win battles. It's about understanding why you won, learning from your mistakes, and constantly striving to be better.
So how do you create that sunshine, those opportunities for growth in peacetime? You can't exactly just manufacture a war to toughen up your troops.
Right, and ethically you never would. But you can cultivate a culture that celebrates the small victories, a culture that encourages soldiers to push themselves and learn from both successes and failures. It's about creating that training environment that's as realistic and demanding as possible without putting anyone at unnecessary risk.
I'm thinking about those incredibly immersive simulations that militaries use these days, like the virtual reality programs that put soldiers in incredibly stressful life or death situations. Have you seen any of those, and do you think they're effective?
Oh, absolutely. Those simulations can be incredibly valuable tools.
Hmm.
They let soldiers experience the pressure, the uncertainty of combat, but in a controlled setting.
So they can make mistakes and learn from them without real-world consequences.
Exactly. But even with those high-tech simulations, there's no substitute for a real-world experience, for facing the unknown and overcoming those challenges together as a unit.
He seems to be saying that you can't just drill military virtue into soldiers, like teaching a set of rules.
Definitely not. It has to come from within, from a shared understanding of what's at stake, the risks, the
The
sacrifices.
fate of it all.
Yes. And that's where strong leadership comes in, which Clausewitz talks about a lot. Even though he was writing in the 19th century, his insights on leadership are timeless. He argues that the best leaders, they embody military virtue themselves.
They lead by example.
Absolutely. They inspire their troops through their courage, discipline, and unwavering commitment.
So it's about more than just giving orders and expecting obedience.
Right. It's about building trust, mutual respect, where soldiers feel empowered to take initiative, make decisions under pressure. He talks about clear communication, making sure soldiers understand not just what they're doing, but why.
The why is so important. It gives them that sense of purpose.
Exactly. And he really stresses that leaders need to be adaptable because every situation is unique. Sometimes you have to throw out the rule book and trust your gut.
It's like that saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. You need those leaders who can think on their feet, inspire their troops, even in chaos.
And never lose sight of the big picture. And that ability to adapt, to stay calm and decisive under pressure, that's a key part of military virtue.
It makes you wonder, is that something you're born with? That ability to adapt? Or is it something you can learn?
It's the age-old question, isn't it? Nature versus nurture. Clausewitz seems to land on the side of, well, both.
What do you mean?
He thinks some people, sure, they might be naturally inclined towards leadership, but true military leadership, that's a different beast. He says it's cultivated through experience, education, and a real conscious effort to embody those virtues we've been talking about.
So it's not enough to just have the right instincts. You have to hone them, refine them.
Exactly. And he's a big proponent of studying military history. And not just to learn battle tactics, but to understand the human side of it all.
The decisions that were made, the consequences of those decisions.
Right, learning from the past, from both the triumphs and the failures, and figuring out how those lessons apply today. He's also a big believer in continuous learning, never becoming complacent, always questioning your assumptions.
Always be learning. I like that.
And mentorship, finding those who have walked the path before you, those who embody that military virtue and soaking up their wisdom.
It sounds like, for Clausewitz, maintaining that military virtue is an ongoing effort, both individually and as a unit. It's not a destination, it's a journey.
He actually uses a really evocative phrase. He talks about maintaining a war footing, even in times of peace.
Whoa, okay. That sounds a little intense, like always ready to jump into battle.
No, not quite. He clarifies it's not about being on edge, constantly waiting for the next conflict. It's more about cultivating a mindset, a state of readiness that doesn't disappear just because the guns are silent.
Okay, so more about fostering a culture of preparedness, of being able to adapt.
Exactly. It's about weaving that military virtue into the very fabric of the military, from basic training to the highest levels of command, so that when a crisis does hit, the shift isn't this jarring change, but a natural progression.
Like a well-oiled machine that's regularly maintained versus one that's been sitting idle, gathering dust.
Perfect analogy. Which one do you think is going to be more reliable when it really counts?
No question about it. This has been a fascinating deep dive. It's amazing how Clausewitz's ideas, even though he was writing centuries ago, still resonate so strongly today.
Absolutely. He really makes you think about what it means to be truly effective in the military. It goes beyond just having the best equipment or the most soldiers.
It's about that mindset, that spirit that can withstand the test of time. It's about that military virtue. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Always a pleasure to dig into these topics with you.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.